Okay, welcome sa ating second part of the video lesson on making an IEP. This time, I'm going to show you a sample template of the IEP released by the Department of Education here in the Philippines. Uh, I will also conduct a short demonstration on how to fill out some of the areas here. Uh, So before I begin, I want to reiterate that uh, every school or state, especially outside the Philippines, uh, has their own template or layout of the IEP. However, although there are various versions or differences in the layout of how their IEP uh, looks like, the elements or the parts it contain, no, the parts contained in the IEP are almost the same. So, lahat ng IEP merong mga goals. Lahat ng IEP may short-term objectives. Lahat ng IEP may mga interventions and duration and timeline, etc. So, nag-vary lang sa template, but the content is almost the same. So what I want to teach you now in this part of the lesson is how to accomplish those elements, how to do those elements. So regardless of the layout, you can accomplish it if you know how to do each part. Okay, so for the first section of the template that we have here, again, it's the one released by the Department of Education through their memo, Dep and Order number 44 series of 2001. So it begins with the personal information. So you just have to fill it out. Paano po ito masasagutan? So the basis would be the assessment report of the child. Okay, so most of the data that you will need here will come from the assessment report. The background data about the learner, the background data about the parents, the difficulties of the child, you just going to select which is the most relevant. Okay, so for example, the child has difficulty in communicating. So just have to mark it out. Okay, then for this part, yung meeting information, you just have to write the date when the meeting was conducted, the purpose of the meeting, for example, if it's temporary or interim, initial, just the beginning or end of the term, is it a evaluation? Is it a revision? Ayan. You just have to put those details. So, hindi ko na po yun i-demo. So, ang i-demo ko lang po ay yung how to write the goals, the objectives, and the other parts. Following that personal information part comes the IEP team members in attendance. So, the IEP, again, it is conducted by a team composed of different members. Tapos, nakalagay sa part na to yung pangalan ng umattend during the construction, during the development of the IEP. So you just have to write the name and then the signature and then the date. So sino-sino ba yan? So usually the parents, the learner, the principal or the school head, the SPED teachers of course, psychologists, counselors, nurse, therapist, and interpreter if necessary. Okay? Take note that it is included here the ano bang part, ano tawag doon? A statement that indicates whether the learners and other members have the copy of the IEP. It's important that all of them has the copy. Okay, so para alam nila kung anong responsibilities ng bawat member. Okay, so you have to be attentive with that part. So let's proceed with the one of the major elements every IEP has. The present level of academic achievement and functional performance, or the PLAF. So it basically states what is the current status of the child. So where do you get the data that you need to enter in this part? Psychoeducational assessment report. Assessment reports. interviews, observation. Those are the methods or documents you can use to gather data na ilalagay natin sa part na to. So, in this portion, several sections were included. So, let's go in each section. The first one has to do with the background or the former records of the child. So, here you're going to state the recent evaluation or results of the school and division assessments. So we have a hypothetical case here. So assuming that we have this recent evaluation of Alex. So Alex, a third grade pupil, was most recently evaluated in March 2025. The psychoeducational evaluation indicated that Alex meets eligibility criteria for learning disability in the areas of reading comprehension and written expression. Cognitive testing revealed average to above average verbal reasoning and visual spatial skills with significant weakness in processing speed. Okay, so etc. etc. So nakalagay dyan sa part na yan yung previous assessment history ng bata. Okay, so let's proceed with the next one. So we have the description of academic, developmental, and functional strengths. Okay, so kung meron tayong strengths, meron tayong needs or weakness. Okay, coming the next part. So dito sa part na to, ilalagay lang natin yung summary ng strengths ni Alex. Dito sa template na to, compressed or combined. So in this template, all the domains were combined. So academics, cognitive, language, and even, behavior, social, etc. So combined na. But in some of the templates I've encountered, classified per domain yung strengths. So merong strengths for language, strengths for social, strengths for ganyan. Per area, classified siya. But here, it's indicated the general overview of the strengths of the child. So areas are combined. On the next part, you're going to put the needs or the weakness on those areas. So let's pay attention on the needs, okay? Alex requires support in decoding unfamiliar words. So when we say decoding, it means understanding. Okay, so hirap daw siya doon. Reading fluency and comprehension strategies. He also struggles with written expression, including organizing his thoughts. Due to processing speed challenges, Alex may take longer to complete written assignments and multi-step directions. Okay. So, yan yung mga needs niya. Okay. So, saan galing yan, sir? Still, it comes from the assessment report, which is supported by interviews and observation. You just have to state it in narrative format. Okay. Sir, there are a lot of weakness or needs that we have to address. But there's so many. Kailangan ba namin ilagay yun lahat? Okay, so hindi po. Okay, so hindi nyo kailangan ilagay lahat. So ano lang po uh, kailangan or ano lang po yung mga areas of emphasis. Okay, so naalala niyo yung binanggit kanina when we are writing the plot. So we have to see where his current skill lies. Tapos tignan natin kung ano yung expectations ng general education curriculum. Tapos tignan natin yung gap between the current and the expectations. So yung gap would imply the focus o yung inyong areas of concern. Okay. So kanina ang context ni Alex siya ay third grade na. Pero ang kanyang current skill ay pang second grade. So with the gap, doon kayo magfo-focus. So, hindi kayo hindi nyo na pakikialaman yung ibang, ah, yung, hindi nyo na pakikialaman yung ibang weaknesses other than what is within the context. Okay? So, nakalagay dito actually, kung babalikan natin yung part na to. Okay, so we have the difficulties area here. Select the most relevant. Okay. Maaari kasing maraming difficulties yung bata. Okay. Especially if the learner has intellectual disability. Okay. So, probably all of those majority of those have difficulties. Pero pipiliin lang muna natin yung most relevant. Because always remember, you're going to implement this IEP for 1 year. So, you'll have to prioritize which areas need emphasis. Okay. So, for example, you want to, since the difficulty of Alex focuses on communication, perhaps you will mark that as the emphasis, no? Yung one of the most relevant difficulty in communicating. Therefore, if that's your emphasis, the emphasis on your plot narrative will revolve around the context of communication, reading and writing. Okay, so hindi na muna natin pakikialaman yung weaknesses and yung needs sa ibang aspects na hindi mo naman chinikan doon sa areas of relevance. Okay, so now let's proceed with the next section. Parental concerns regarding their child's education. So dito ililista lang natin ano yung mga concerns ng parents. Kasi mahalaga din yung um, side ng parents when it comes to making priorities and making decisions. So mamaya hindi naman pala yan um, out of concern naman pala yan ng parent. So maaaring hindi muna natin siya i-prioritize but still nasa waiting list natin yung need na yun. Pero hindi muna natin siya agad-agad ipa-prioritize kasi iba muna yung concern ng parent. So, i-consider natin yun. Okay? So, for example, Alex's parents are concerned about his ongoing difficulties in reading and writing. So, dun pa lang, may idea na tayo, ano ba yung bibigyan natin ng emphasis? Okay? So, next we have this part. Impact of the disability on involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. So, bibigyan lang natin siya ng, yung part na yan, sundan lang natin siya ng, parang inference or hinuha or ano ba yung mga implications ng mga difficulties na to sa kanyang performance sa general education. So, here's an example. So, Alex's disability in reading and written expression significantly impacts his ability to access grade level content independently, etc., etc. So, without specialized instruction, Alex is at risk of falling further behind his peers in reading heavy content areas, such as English, science, and social studies. Okay, so ilalagay lang natin ano yung mga implications ng difficulties na to. Ano yung mga posibleng mangyari kay Alex. Okay, so next part. So now let's move with the consideration of special factors. Uh, this is a very common part of an IEP. So majority of the templates and layouts of the IEP I have encountered contains this portion. So ano ba ang laman nito? It's more of a checklist. So there are several questions here pertaining or asking whether the student needs something special or whether the student needs something uh, whether the student needs a specific device, whether the student needs a specific service. So dito natin siya i-indicate. For example, does the learner have difficulty in relating with people? Ayan, check nyo lang, yes or no. Si Alex, wala namang problem interacting with people eh. So, no. Does the learner have difficulty in moving or walking? Si Alex, wala. No. So, does the learner have difficulty seeing or blind ba siya or may visual impairment? Wala, etc. etc. Does the learner need assistive technology? Okay. Device or services. Kailangan ba niya ng mga specific tools? Okay. Yes. So, kung yes, pwede mong specify yon. Okay. Does the learner require alternative format for instructional materials? Kung yes, pwedeng paki-specify. Okay. Itong Braille, usually, we use it for the blind, no? Large type for visual impairment. Medyo malabo. Lalakihan lang natin yung format. Auditory, as a support for learners with, ito to, pwede to for reading, students with reading problems. Okay, so if they cannot read the text, it can be read aloud to them. Okay, so for them to, have access to the material. So, kung kailangan nila ng mga alternative format ng instructional materials, just uh, put a check on this mark, on this area, and then specify what kind of adjustment. So, madali lang tong part na to. So, usually, these statements are constant. The questions are almost the same across different formats. You just have to type or check yes or no. Excuse me. All right. So now let's continue with the next part. Section B, difficulties, barriers, and enabling supports. And this is quite unique to this template. I haven't seen other IEP templates or layouts having this part. So apparently, DepEd adhered to the principle of World Health Organization in defining disability. Kasi World Health Organization defines or views disability as a result of having a problem in interacting with the environment. So, World Health Organization believes that disability happens when a person experiences a barrier when interacting with the environment. So, if you have difficulties in participating in this kind of event or social gathering, or disability happens when you cannot participate because the setting, the context does not allow you to participate. There's a barrier present that hinders you in participating. So for them, for the World Health Organization, uh, disability is like that. So inadopt ng DepEd yung principle ng World Health Organization into coming up with a certain section such as this and integrating it with the IEP. So sa part na yan, we're going to identify the difficulties of the child. So, for example, difficulty in reading. Okay, so that's difficulty in reading. Now, what are the environmental barriers? So we're going to state here the barriers in the classroom or barriers in the school that might hinder Alex in reading. So, uh, for example, complex passages with unfamiliar terminologies. Okay, so that's one of the barriers. Okay, and then another barrier for difficulty in reading might be in the context of Alex's case. Uh, insufficient uh, Okay, possible environmental barrier, insufficient reading materials appropriate for uh, his problem or for his reading difficulty. Okay. So maaaring nangangailangan siya ng mga reading materials pero wala. Okay. So it could be, no? Or another um, difficulty mentioned in Alex's case could be difficulty in writing. So what are the barriers which might hinder Alex, okay, in writing? Okay, what are the uh, factors that might contribute to the difficulty in writing of Alex? So for example, uh, written format of examinations. Knowing Alex has difficulties in writing, having examinations in written format could be challenging for him. Okay. So going back with difficulty in reading, knowing that Alex has difficulty in reading, having passages that are complex, containing unfamiliar words, might be a barrier for Alex. Okay. Having insufficient reading materials could also be a barrier for Alex in uh, improving his reading. But this secondary barrier is quite, uh, far or quite unrelated with the difficulty. Okay, so perhaps let's just remove this one. So let's settle with this uh, um, first example. Okay, now let's proceed with environmental facilitators. So in this case, you're going to put the factors that might help Alex participate in reading activities. So, for example, if Alex has difficulty in reading and the barrier is having complex passages with unfamiliar terminologies, perhaps one of the environmental facilitators could be what? Okay, so unlocking difficulties. Okay, all right. So, for example, before you start reading the paragraph or the passage, the unfamiliar terms that Alex might encounter in reading the passage might be introduced first. So you just going to state the word and the meaning of that word and then use it in a sentence to give Alex a context on how that word is being used. Okay. Then for this one, how can we help Alex participate in writing? Okay, given that barrier. So for example, Alex has an upcoming written exam, but we know that Alex has difficulty in writing. So what factors can help Alex participate in written exam, knowing that he has difficulties in writing? Perhaps we can allow the use of computers. Okay, and in what way? Um, are we measuring handwriting or are we measuring how Alex put his thoughts into written symbols? So if our case is we're measuring handwriting or we're measuring the penmanship of Alex, then it's important to do it handwritten. But if we are measuring how Alex uh organizes his ideas uh into written symbols, then having it in soft copy is not a big deal, di ba? So perhaps kung hirap siya into, handwritten or writing, perhaps we can allow Alex to use computers. Okay? Another case, kung hirap siyang mag-organize ng ideas niya into written symbols, perhaps we can allow Alex answer the exam through oral. Now, perhaps Alex can, verbally state the answer, okay, instead of writing it. So, Alex still is able to participate in the examination. Okay. So, in response to barriers, given their difficulties, environmental facilitators or the enabling supports are the factors or the things that we do in order for us to help the student participate in the activity despite the barrier, despite the difficulty. So again, going back, we can help Alex participate in reading by unlocking the difficult terminologies first. Then we can also let Alex participate in writing, in written examinations. How? Knowing he has difficulties in writing. So perhaps we can allow the use of computers and we can allow Alex to answer the test orally. Or if you want another environmental facilitator, perhaps you can uh, guide Alex hand uh, when writing. Okay, that's one of the basic support. Okay, so now let's proceed with accommodation. So here in this part, you're just going to narrate or state the factors that you stated here in a narrative format, in a more polished format. So in this case, uh, the teacher uh, may present the difficult terminologies and explain and sorry, too much and and use them in a sentence to give Alex a context. Okay, so that might work. Okay, so then for this one, difficulty in writing, then your environmental facilitators are this. So the teacher may guide Alex and when writing or answering the exam. The teacher may allow Alex to type his answers on a keyboard using a word processor. Okay. Then another, the teacher may allow may allow Alex to answer the test or really. So that's it. So you might think medyo redundant, no? Kumbaga parang quite redundant itong part na to. Environmental facilitators and accommodation. Well, we have the same sentiments. But if we're going to look at the DepEd's format, it's that eh. So it's like that. So we have the column for environmental facilitators and we have the column for accommodation. Okay, no, so this is how we uh, present this one. It gives the reader an initial idea on what are the different difficulties of Alex. Which situation could Alex have, problems with, and what are the possible things we can do to help Alex participate on those activities. So now let's proceed with the major or highlights of, the IEP. So of course, every IEP has this in different layouts nga lang. Okay, so let's begin by setting the target interest and the goals. So again, for you to be able to answer this, you have to go back to your baseline data. And where is your baseline data? It is found in the present level of academic and functional performance. So again ha, ito inuulit ko lang po, ito ay naka-contextualize or this is contextualized based on your most prioritized difficulty. So we're going back to the part in which you identified the most relevant difficulties you want to address to the child. So kung difficulty in communicating, the context of the plan will revolve around difficulties in communicating, such as reading and writing. Okay? So let's take a look doon sa plan. Okay? So we have to identify the specific difficulties in reading muna. Okay, sa reading muna tayo. Okay, so let's take a look on the needs because the needs portion contains the difficulties portion, the difficulties of Alex. So Alex requires support in decoding unfamiliar words, reading fluency, and comprehension strategies. The next part talks about written expressions and understanding. Okay. So now let's focus on this one. Hirap siyang mag-decode. Decoding means understanding. And he also has difficulties in reading fluency. So medyo vague. Okay, so medyo vague. What I mean by vague is hindi detalyado. So we have to be specific with the baseline. Saan siya currently? Ano yung current status ni Alex when it comes to reading? Ano yung current status niya with regards to reading fluency? So, maaari nating makuha yung detalye dyan base sa previous assessment. So, let's take a look on this first part. Alex, a third grade pupil, was most recently evaluated, etc., etc. The psychoeducational evaluation indicated that Alex meets eligibility criteria for learning disability. Ayan. And then let's take a look here. On curriculum-based reading assessments, Alex is reading at a mid-second grade level, significantly below grade level expectations. Okay, so, ayan, mas detalyado na to. So, yung reading level, for example, ay yung comprehension and fluency. Yun yung one of the, yun yung ilan sa mga areas na sinusukat sa reading. Your fluency and comprehension. Suppose that Alex, being a third grade pupil, has only a second grade level when it comes to reading and comprehension. So pang grade 3 na si Alex, pero yung reading comprehension niya and yung fluency niya ay pang grade 2. Example lang. So ano yung goal natin? So you have to uh, set the standard. So in setting the standard, you have to know first where Alex currently is. So yun nga, currently nasa pang second grade siya. So anong gusto mo mangyari? Itaas natin siya sa third grade. Kasi yun yung expectation sa kanya. So your goal should be SMART. So still remember the definition or the acronym SMART? SMART means specific, meaning to say your goal has to be clearly stated and clearly defined. You know what to target. M stands for measurable, meaning to say your goal has to be reflected or it has to be observed physically. You can observe it directly with your naked eye. You can see the student doing it. Okay. Then A stands for attainable. Okay. Attainable also means developmentally appropriate. So if your child is 9 years old, then your goals must be somewhere around that level, around that childhood level, 9 years old, 10 years old. It should not go far beyond adult level kasi hindi na siya developmentally appropriate. It it might not be attainable for the child. R stands for relevant. Relevant means being useful or being connected, being aligned with what it's supposed to address. For example, you're addressing the area of communication. Therefore, your goals should be connected or should be addressing the communication problems. If it's not addressing the communication problems, your goal is not relevant. Then P stands for time bound. Remember that this IEP is to be implemented for 1 year or for the school year. So make sure that your goals are achievable within that time bound, within that time limit or time duration. Okay, so having that said, uh, let's proceed with stating the target interest and the goals. So ang target interest natin would be would be our target area, which is reading. So an example of how to write a SMART goal could be like this. By the end of the school year, Alex will be able to read at a third grade level. Um, independent. And uh, so let me make it more specific. Okay. Alex will be able to um, demonstrate comprehension um, of texts. Uh, let's make it more specific. Third grade texts. Okay. Without prompting. Okay na ba yan? By the end of the school year, Alex will be able to demonstrate comprehension of third grade texts without prompting. That's, one goal. Okay. If you want another goal, addressing fluency, we can add, okay? By the end of the school year, Alex will be able to read third grade texts fluently and independently. Okay? Is it specific? Yes, because you are specifically targeting comprehension, and in this one, you're specifically targeting fluency. The reason why I made it separate goals, is to avoid confusion. Kasi kapag pinagsama mo yan, hindi na siya specific. What if na-meet mo yung comprehension, pero hindi mo na-meet si fluency? That means palyado yung goal mo or bumagsak ka sa goal mo. How about if you meet fluency pero hindi mo na-meet si comprehension? You failed the objective. So in order for you to have a specific goal for each skill, make it separate. So one tip, do not use two verbs in one objective. So, in this case, pinaghiwalay ko yung verbs na demonstrate tsaka yung read. Kasi pag pinagsama ko yan, tapos bumagsak siya dun sa isa, automatically, hindi mo na na-achieve yung goal na yun. But if you made it separate, so it's more specific. Measurable. Kaya mo bang makita directly or kaya mo bang ma-observe physically na ah, nakakapag-demonstrate siya ng comprehension? Okay. Maaaring hindi. Okay. So, sir, paano natin i-address yan? Paano natin, kasi sabi ko nga kanina, sa on my previous discussion about making sure it's measurable, we avoid the use of the word understanding or we avoid the use of comprehension. If I haven't mentioned that, so let me recall it. Hindi tayo gumagamit ng word na understand. So, sa objective, to understand the text, to comprehend the text. Kasi hindi natin directly nakikita yung pangunawa ng student. Can you see that the student is actually it's actually understanding the text? Can you read the mind of your student? Can you know if your student is understanding it? Hindi. So, kailangan natin ng verb na mag ma-manifest ng understanding ng bata. So, for example, uh, instead of using the word understand, the learner will be able to uh, identify the answer or the learner will be able to answer the questions correctly based on the text being read. So, pag nasagot nila yung questions correctly, therefore, you can confirm that the child has comprehension or understanding of the text. Okay, so in this case, I used demonstrate comprehension, but it's still quite vague, no? So how do we improve this one? By the end of the school year, Alex will be able to demonstrate comprehension of third grade text without prompting. Pwede natin itong remedyohan by means of answering uh, uh, process questions. Okay, so is it specific now or is it measurable? Yes, kasi you can see comprehension if Alex can answer, okay, the process questions. All right. So now let's proceed with objectives. Let me transfer this one to second row. So in objectives, what's the difference between objectives and goals? Objectives are shorter. So it's quite specific or it's more specific than the goal. Okay, so my tip here is objectives are the stepping stones that once these stepping stones are achieved, it will lead you to the goal. So let's construct the objectives for this one. Let's split the cells into three or make it two na lang. Okay. So for example, we're going to create two objectives out of this one goal. Objectives are usually targeted per quarter. Okay. So it's up to you. And how do you address this? Because the goals are for the year. Okay? So usually it's annual. Kaya may tinatawag tayong annual goals. So how are we going to achieve this annual goal? We have to set benchmarks or short-term objectives per quarter. So let me just have two objectives in this case. Oh. So, for example, by the end of the first quarter, Alex will be able to identify the meaning of, say, 20 to 30 unfamiliar words appropriate for third grade. Uh, then another objective by the end of the second quarter, Alex um, will be able to, let's say, identify once again, identify the meaning of common, of idiomatic expressions, uh, appropriate for third grade. Okay. So this is just an example on how we create objectives. The point here is that whenever you achieve all of these objectives, it will lead you to achieving your goal. Okay. So there are many techniques on how we write objectives. In some cases, they focus on just one aspect. For example, if you want to specifically just address the unfamiliar words all throughout, then you focus on unfamiliar words all throughout. So for example, by the second, if in the first quarter you are aiming for at least 20 to 30 words, on second quarter perhaps you may do uh 30 to 50 words. And then by third quarter you aim for 60 to 70 unfamiliar words. Okay. Then for fourth quarter, you go for 70 to 90, no? Whenever, uh, as long as it's appropriate or as long as it's, needed or necessary. So, ganun. So, perhaps you might focus on just one aspect, then as the quarter progresses, the intensity and the complexity increases. Or you might do something like this. So you have a different target for quarter one, you have a different target for quarter two, because in that case, unfamiliar words are only targeted for the first quarter, but in this case, we now are going to idiomatic expressions. Okay, so it's up to you. But the one thing I want to point out, whatever the type of, IEP that you have, whatever the layout you have, wherever you are, no, in Philippines or in United States or other countries, your objectives always have to uh, be connected with your goals. Remember the stepping stones. Objectives are the stepping stones for you to address the goal. Because if we teach Alex lots of unfamiliar words and we teach Alex idiomatic expressions appropriate for third grade, when Alex encounters those kind of words in reading passages in third grade, he can understand those passages and therefore increase Alex comprehension. Okay, so that's it. So now let's proceed with intervention. So how do we write intervention? So I'm so sorry if I put my headphones down. Okay, so how do we write intervention? So intervention, these are the teaching strategies or the services that you want to provide for each objective. Um, So let's split the cells once again. Uh, so for example, one of the intervention strategies here in teaching Alex unfamiliar words, for example, practice drills. Okay. So another thing, one on one tutorial pronouncing unfamiliar words. Okay. So in pronouncing unfamiliar words, uh, another intervention which might help, speech therapy, addressing difficulties. Just an example in case Alex needs it. Okay, now for the timeline, uh, we're going to state how often or uh, each intervention lasts. So, for example, you're going to have a drill on unfamiliar words for how long? So, for example, every day. Oh no. But you have to specify which day of the week. For example, Monday to Friday. Poor Alex. Just kidding. It's for you. Okay. Then, how about for the tutorial on the pronunciation? Okay. Perhaps we can move it uh, prior to the drills of unfamiliar meanings. So if you're going to do that Monday to Friday every day, perhaps you can follow it up immediately after you practice pronunciation, follow it up immediately with the meaning. So it's still going to be every day. Then for speech therapy, so speech therapy is quite expensive and it might not be feasible with some other parents. So perhaps you can schedule speech therapy once a week. It depends on the case. Depends on the capacity of the parent. Perhaps they might schedule, twice a week. Yeah, depending on the case. This is just an example. Okay, so this is how it works. So we state the timeline for each intervention. Okay, so to give us a guide, how often do we do this? For how long? Okay. So since the objective is by the end of the first quarter, it's understood that these interventions are going to take place during the first quarter, every Monday to Friday. Okay. Now, who are the persons responsible? So, on the next column, we're going to identify the individuals who are responsible in conducting each intervention. So, for example, on this one-on-one tutorial on reading, so for example, we can put here the special education teacher. Okay. And then in this case, yeah, special education teacher also. In the case, if in case assistants are present, perhaps teacher aid might be of help. And then of course, in therapy, speech therapist. Okay. So for the remarks column, we're going to leave it blank for the meantime because here in this part, you're going to state the current progress or the current status of the intervention. So for example, uh, you print you have printed this IEP. Then Upon implementation, turns out you have a certain remark or comment on each intervention. You can put it here. So, for example, on one-on-one reading tutorial, perhaps the remarks could be, you know, how's the status? Is it ongoing? How is it going? Is it, progressing well, or, beginning, developing, or what? Okay, so you might also add a remark that this intervention is not working. So perhaps you might write on the remarks that it's not working or adjustment is necessary, so that when an IEP meeting comes, so that when a meeting comes, you know which intervention to address because you have, your notes on the remarks column. And then for the progress or next steps, that would entail your anticipated strategies or anticipated uh, interventions in case that one-on-one tutorial on reading is already done or has already, um, achieved its purpose. How can you level up the intervention? Okay, so perhaps, let me think of an example. Okay, reading or pronouncing uh, unfamiliar words embedded on a passage. This is kind of more sophisticated intervention because on the first intervention that we had earlier, these are just isolated words that Alex has to read. But this time, for the next step, assuming that Alex progressed quickly on this kind of intervention, perhaps as one of our backup intervention or, supporting intervention, we can use this one. We can now allow Alex to read unfamiliar words that are embedded on a passage. Okay. So that's the general idea on how uh, we conduct it or how we write it. And then the same goes with all of the objectives that you're going to include in each goal. Okay, so remember, you will only write goals that are relevant to the difficulty that you want to address. If the difficulty of the child uh, puts emphasis on communication, therefore, the goals of your IEP has to revolve around communication aspect only. This is to avoid overcrowding or being overwhelmed with too much goals. Okay, so remember that we have to consider the limited capacities of students. Okay, so as much as possible, we have to set realistic goals. We can set two or more goals, of course. We can set uh, two or more depending on the context, but it has to be relevant with which area of difficulty you want to address. Okay, so we're not going to proceed anymore with these uh, aspects, but I hope that you're able to grasp the idea on how to write this section. Okay, because every IEP has goals, has objectives, has strategies or intervention, proposed timeline, and individuals responsible. Some of the some of the IEP templates do not have this progress or next steps. Okay, so Again, I want to remind you that whenever you write your objectives naman this time, make sure that these objectives are stepping stones, that when these objectives are achieved, it will lead the student to achieving the goal. And for the intervention, these are just strategies. What are the services that you're going to provide in order for you to achieve the objective? And for the timeline, you're just going to state for how long each intervention is going to last and for, what specific days. Okay. Sometimes the number of hours could be specified. For example, uh, 1 hour per day. If you want to be more specific, you can do that. Then individuals responsible. Okay, so who in the team members could be put here? Okay, so it's not always the expenditures. In in case that it's appropriate and necessary, you can also include the parent, the regular education teachers, the medical doctor, etc. Psychologist, guidance counselor, as long as they're necessary for the intervention. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so now let's proceed with the next part. So, on the last section, which is the learner transition, this is usually updated once the child reaches 14 years old, or when the child is, entering adolescence and preparing for adult life. So, learner transition, uh, on this section, it's composed of several parts. Okay, so we have the interest, we have the work opportunities, intervention and transition skills, and individuals responsible, as well as remarks. So for the interest, it's different from the interest that was indicated on the initial part of the IEP. The target interest there pertains to the target area that you want to address. Here, the interest pertains to the child's interest. So usually, whenever we plan for our, future work, we consider our areas of interest. For example, uh, if I'm interested in plants, the work opportunities that I'm going to consider are something related to plants. For example, farming, gardening, landscaping. Okay. So if I am interested in robotics, I might consider working in industries that operates machines or that utilizes machines heavily on their operations. So something like that. So here you're going to uh, look for the interest of the child. So saan po natin makukuha? Where are we going to gather that information? Of course, we're going to go back to the uh, baseline report or sa assessment report ng bata. You're going to, perhaps you can also conduct interviews with the parent. What are the different interests of the child? And you're going to list them down here. And then for each interest, perhaps you can identify possible work opportunities for each interest. It's quite interesting because for each interest, you're going to think of possible uh, opportunities where this child can go to once the child exits schooling. And then for the third column, transition skills. What are the interventions that you are uh, planning for the child to take in order for that child to be skilled on that work? So, for example, my interest is on plants, and uh, the child's interest or Alex's interest is on plants, and the work opportunities that I'm considering for Alex is Alex might be or could be working. Alex could work as a farmer. Okay, uh, a farmer. Yeah. So yun, Alex could work as a farmer. Or Alex, to be more specific, Alex could work in a greenhouse. Okay, so yun, sabihin natin ganun. Then, interventions. Ano yung mga pwede mong ituro kay Alex? so that Alex could be prepared working in a greenhouse. So, for example, training about the different types of plants, training about the different garden tools and their purposes, uh, training about the different types of soil and fertilizers, etc. So, kumbaga, all those trainings, all those interventions are designed for Alex to be able to uh, function on that work. Okay. And then for individuals responsible, same goes with what we did earlier. Who are the individuals responsible for each intervention? Okay. We can also include here who are the individuals responsible, or who are the individuals whom we can coordinate with in relation to farming. For example, you know someone, or you know an institution, you know an area which operates a farm. Then you might you might coordinate with the owner of the farm, and try to make linkages or partnerships with that business owner or farmer, make ties, and then coordinate, eventually asking if uh they can accept interns, or you know students to be trained on their farm. So something like that. So it's not only limited to the teachers, parents, and you can this time we can now include uh, uh, other persons or other members of the community in order to help the child. Then for the remarks, again, we can leave it blank for future use. Kasi we can write whether a certain intervention is not working or it's working, or we can indicate whether another concern popped up that needs to be addressed on a meeting, etc. So that's it. So these parts are what comprise an individualized educational plan or program. And I hope that in this lesson, I have given you ideas on how to craft an IEP. Reminder, IEP layouts are different across geographical contexts, but the elements or the contents of each IEP are similar. So if you are familiar with each uh, element, on how to write each element, you can, I can say that you can accomplish any IEP template, provided that you have enough data source. So make sure that you have secured uh, the assessment report of the child, and make sure that you have a thorough data about the background of the child, especially the weaknesses, the needs, and the interests of the child. And that's it. That ends our lesson for that ends our demonstration for IEP, and I hope that you have learned something. Thank you very much. I hope that the learnings you've gained from this lesson will materialize as you prepare an IEP for your student. Thank you very much. God bless.